I guess my project kind of changed a little bit since I went on it. And also I was kind of, I didn't take as many pictures as it seems like a lot of people did, so there's a lot of more graphs in mine because I was pretty bad about taking pictures. Okay. So this was the view from my desk all summer. That's Table Mountain, and I was in Cape Town, South Africa, working as a research intern at the Economic Policy Research Institute, better known as EPRI. So every day I went to, is it not changing?
I think after the first one, you have to do it manually.
Okay. So every day I took a mini cab, which is one of these, to the office, where I did a variety of quantitative and qualitative research on social protection policy, which is what EPRI specializes in. And that's basically an umbrella term that includes any policy designed to improve the well-being of vulnerable populations. And so that can include things like labor market interventions that prevent unemployment, improve working standards, social insurance programs that insure against a variety of risks that vulnerable populations are particularly susceptible to, and social assistance programs that provide cash and services to targeted populations. So EPRI specifically works with NGOs and governments in implementing social protection policy. And it also works to evaluate the impact and effectiveness of various social protection policies. So for example, one of the major projects that they worked on was analyzing how well existing aid programs in South Africa and a couple other countries around South Africa reach the people that are most at risk for HIV and the overlaps between those. And so I worked on a couple different projects while I was there. One of the projects I worked on was planning an unconditional cash transfer program in 2 provinces in Nigeria. Up there, you can see. So unconditional cash transfer programs are attempt to encourage a certain type of behavior without any strings attached, just by relieving some of the financial burden that could be getting in the way of that behavior. And so this UCT was targeted at girls ages 6 to 16 in these 2 provinces in an attempt to increase attendance at school. So enrollment in these areas for girls is extremely low, sometimes as low as 16%. And so the idea is that one of the reasons that girls may not be attending school is because of the costs associated, both directly, things like uniforms, transportation costs, and also indirectly, like the opportunity cost of not being able to work. So I was working on a lot of targeting and registration. And so the challenge there was finding people that were not in most data systems and training people in how to find them and register them for these monthly payments. And so I also worked on a couple different projects. My second project was working on evaluating microinsurance as a feasible risk coping mechanism for orphans and vulnerable children. And the main focus of that report was connecting the dots between these programs and policies that are designed to help a certain group of people and figuring out how to actually reach them when they're most of the time left out of formal data systems. And so the third project that I was working on, sorry, I've kind of gotten behind in the slides, but was an evaluation of the largest public works program in South Africa called the Expanded Public Works Program, or the EPWP. And so we were looking at what effects the program had on people that were hired by the EPWP in the long term. And that involved a lot of research into the South African labor market, which leads into this. So I was researching a lot of the determinants for what amounts to an incredibly unequal distribution of wealth, unemployment burden, and educational attainment. And so a huge amount of that rooted back to apartheid, which ended only 20 years ago, and then the colonial history of the country before that. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of this inequality is racially determined. And so this is a map of Cape Town, and you can see it's a city that was literally designed to be segregated. And this is like current data. And so historically, non-whites were forcibly removed from the areas that whites wanted to settle in and placed in these townships or slums that are very far away from the city center. And these neighborhood classifications are still incredibly rigid today. And so this is a settlement where people live, and you can see that it's the same mountain that I saw from my desk, but it's a world away. And so I went to some of these settlements to do field work, but I think that one of the themes that I found in South Africa was that it's very easy for people that are well off to completely ignore them because they're so far out of the way. And the main interaction is kind of through these very high security systems and blocking themselves off from the rest of the world. This is like a very common occurrence to see electrical fences. And this kind of all roots back to what I found was an incredible amount of racism that was like palpable and constant, and in a way that I couldn't really have prepared myself for, and that was pretty difficult to deal with on a daily basis. And so while I was actually living in this unequal and kind of very segregated society, I was researching that inequality, and what I read corroborated what I was seeing on a daily basis. So as you can see, South Africa has by far one of the highest Gini coefficient in this group of countries. It's almost 0.7. And for those of you that don't know what Gini coefficient is, it's a measure of income inequality, and it measures what percentage of wealth in a society each quantile of the population holds. And so it's the area of the gray, more or less. So the more the rich have, the less equal the society. So in terms of South Africa, that gray area would be a lot higher. So this, combined with actually working with policymakers on some of the evaluations that I was doing, was, I would say, a huge reality check for me. I think at Reed we're taught about the beauty of the idea and the theory and the life of the mind. And I think we forget, or at least I forgot, how messy and cruel the real world can be, and how politics and actual policymakers can be, and how nice it is to be able to retreat back into theory again.